The alarm went off at 3 in the morning. Colonel Henry Graham was already awake, standing at the window of his office at the Pentagon, staring at nothing. He had not slept well in 20 years, not since the day the radio telescopes picked up the first confirmed signal from deep space. That was the day everything changed. That was the day humanity learned it was not alone. The signal had come from the Vex Collective, a military force that controlled 4 star systems near the outer edge of the galaxy. They had sent a message in basic mathematics and physics, things that any advanced civilization would understand. The message was simple. We know you exist, and we will come. 20 years of waiting. 20 years of preparing. 20 years of building weapons, training soldiers, and making plans that everyone hoped would never be needed. Now, at 3 in the morning, the alarms told him that the waiting was over. Henry walked down the long corridor to the command center. Soldiers stood at attention as he passed. Their faces were tight with fear, even though they had trained for this day. Training was not the same as the real thing. Nothing could prepare you for the real thing. The command center was huge, with screens covering every wall. People worked at computers, talking quietly into headsets, reading data as it came in from satellites high above Earth. The room smelled like coffee and sweat. Dr. Patricia Wells was already there, standing in the center of the room like a captain on a ship. She was one of the world's leading experts on alien technology, or at least what they guessed alien technology might look like. She had spent 2 decades studying the signals the Vex had sent, trying to understand their weapons, their tactics, their weaknesses. She was brilliant and tough, and she did not smile often. They arrived 4 minutes ago, Patricia said without looking up from her screen. 17 ships. They came in from the north and are taking position above North America and Europe. They have not fired yet. Henry felt his stomach go tight. 17 ships. That was more than the war games had suggested. In the simulations, they'd expected 10, maybe 12. 17 was bad. Show me, Henry said. Patricia touched her screen, and the main display lit up with a view of Earth from space. Henry had seen this image 1,000 times in training, but this time it was real. 17 massive shapes hung above the planet, arranged in a pattern that looked like teeth. The ships were huge, kilometers long, covered with what looked like weapons arrays. These were not peaceful ships. These were warships, built for one purpose only: to destroy and to take what they wanted. They are broadcasting a message, Patricia said. She turned up the volume on the speakers. A voice came through, but not a human voice. It was strange, harsh, like metal scraping on metal. The computer translated it into English, and the words appeared on the screen. Attention, inhabitants of the planet Earth. This is the Vex Collective Navy. Your world contains resources that we require. You have 2 hours to surrender all weapons and submit to our authority. If you do not comply, we will remove you from this planet. This is not a negotiation. This is not a threat. This is a statement of fact. You have 2 hours. The countdown begins now. The message ended. There was a long silence in the command center. Henry looked around the room. Everyone was looking at him, waiting for him to tell them what to do. He was a soldier. Soldiers gave orders, and other soldiers followed those orders. That was how the military worked. But this was different. This was the end of everything humans knew, or the beginning of something new. He did not know which. Henry picked up the red phone that sat on the main desk. This phone went directly to the president. It rang twice before someone answered. "This is President Margaret Chan," a woman's voice said. She sounded calm, but Henry could hear the stress underneath. "Henry, tell me we are ready." "Yes, Madam President," Henry said. "We are ready. We have been ready for 20 years. Every military base on Earth has been prepared for this moment. Every soldier knows what to do, Every weapon system is powered up and waiting for orders. And if we fight them? The president asked. What happens if we fight and we lose? Henry had thought about this question many times over the years. He had played out every scenario, every possibility in his mind. The answer was always the same. If we surrender, Henry said, they will take what they want and leave us with nothing. They said they would remove us from the planet. That means death for everyone, Madam President. That means the end of the human race. But if we fight, we have a chance. We have prepared for this. Our weapons work. Our soldiers are the best trained and the most determined people on this planet. We have a chance. The president was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, How many soldiers will die if we fight? Many, Henry said. He did not lie to the president. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. But they will fight knowing why they are fighting. They will fight to protect their families, their homes, their world. That is something the Vex will never have. That is our advantage. Another silence. Then, do it. Give the order. I am authorizing full military response. God help us all. The line went dead. Henry turned to the room. Every person in the command center was staring at him. He picked up the secure radio that connected him to every military base on Earth. This is Colonel Henry Graham, he said. His voice was clear and strong. By order of the President of the United States, I am authorizing full military response against the Vex Collective. All units a go. Repeat, all units a go. The time to defend our world is now. He released the button. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, across the world, soldiers moved. In Nevada, fighter pilots ran toward their jets. In California, naval ships powered up their engines and began to move toward the coast. In the Atlantic Ocean, submarines rose from the depths like whales breaking the surface. In bases across every continent, soldiers picked up their weapons and moved into position. In Japan, in England, in Germany, in Australia, in Brazil, in Africa, everywhere, humans prepared for battle. Patricia walked over to Henry and stood beside him. Together, they watched the screens as the military of Earth came alive. We might all die today, Patricia said. Yes, Henry agreed. But we will not die on our knees. We will die as warriors, fighting for our home. One of the young soldiers in the command center started to pray quietly. Others joined in, each person with their own God, their own beliefs, their own hopes. The room filled with whispered prayers in 100 different languages. Above Earth, the Vex ships began to move. They had sent their message. They had given their warning. Now they were coming down. They were coming to take Earth. But Earth was ready. The war for human survival had begun. The explosion came from above, a bright flash that turned the sky white. Major Lisa Norton felt the shock wave hit the orbital station, knocking equipment loose from the walls. Alarms screamed. Red lights filled the command center. She grabbed the edge of the control panel to keep from falling, her eyes fixed on the tactical display in front of her. The Vex had fired their first shot, hitting an early warning satellite. That satellite had been tracking their movements. Now it was gone. But Lisa had known this would happen. They had planned for it. Report, Lisa said into her headset. Her voice was steady, calm, like she was asking someone to pass the salt at dinner. Satellite 12 is offline, her second officer reported. Backing up to Satellite 13. No loss of military capability, ma'am. Good. They had 62 satellites in the network. The Vex could not knock out all of them before the counterattack began. That was the whole idea of the plan. You could not fight an invisible enemy. So humans had made themselves visible. Humans had made themselves visible. They had put eyes in space, eyes that could see everything the Vex did. Lisa was 43 years old. She had been an astronaut for 15 years before being moved to military command. She understood space better than almost any other human alive. She understood how to move through vacuum, how to fire weapons in zero gravity, how to think in 3 dimensions instead of 2. The Vex, as far as anyone knew, had never fought a war in space. They had never had to. No one had ever been strong enough to fight them until now. Down below, on Earth, the first waves of American fighters had lifted off. Lisa could track them on the display, little blips moving at incredible speed toward the descending Vex ships. The Vex ships were bigger, much bigger, but size was not everything. The American fighters were fast, and they carried weapons that the Vex did not expect. 2 Vex ships broke from the main formation and began to descend toward the United States. They were heading for Washington, D.C., Lisa guessed. The capital, the seat of human government. It was a smart tactical move. Take out the leadership, and everything else would collapse. At least, that is what the Vex probably believed. Lisa picked up the phone that connected her to Colonel Henry Graham in the Pentagon. They had trained together for this moment. They knew what each other would do without having to say much. They are coming down, Lisa said. 2 ships heading for the capital. 3 more heading for bases in Europe. We see them, Henry's voice came back. We are moving assets into position. The surprise should hit them in about 4 minutes. The surprise. That was the code name for the kinetic strike network, 60 tungsten rods that hung in space like swords of Damocles. They weighed as much as a car each, and they could fall from orbit at speeds that would create an explosion equal to a large bomb. No explosives needed, just gravity and speed. The Vex did not know they were there because humans had hidden them well, buried them in garbage fields and dead satellites that the Vex's sensors had probably classified as junk. 3 minutes passed. Then 2. Then 1. Lisa gave the order. Fire the rods. 60 tungsten pieces fell from orbit. They fell like meteors, guided by the most advanced computer systems humans had ever built. The targeting was perfect. The Vex ships had no time to run. The first impact hit a Vex warship square in the middle. The ship's shields, designed to stop energy weapons and chemical explosives, did nothing against pure kinetic force. The rod punched through the hull like a bullet through paper. The ship's reactor exploded from within, and the warship became a fireball expanding across the sky. 1 ship gone. The second rod hit another Vex ship, crippling its propulsion systems. The warship began to fall toward Earth, trailing smoke and debris. 2 hits confirmed, Lisa reported to Henry. 1 destroyed, 1 disabled. But the remaining 3 Vex ships had activated their shields now that they knew they were under attack. The tungsten rods that fell toward them bounced off the shield barriers or burned up in the explosions. The Vex commanders had learned quickly. They were adapting. That was the problem with fighting aliens. They were not stupid. They could learn fast. The 2 Vex ships heading for Washington released landing pods. Small, fast, armored containers that would survive the descent through the atmosphere. They carried troops. Heavy troops. The kind of soldiers the Vex sent when they wanted to take a position by force. The American fighters intercepted the pods with missiles. Some of the pods were hit and exploded, but others got through. They slammed into the ground around Washington, D.C., and armored figures began to emerge. Lisa watched the video feed from the ground cameras. The Vex warriors were huge, nearly 8 feet tall, covered in armor that looked like insect skin. They had weapons built into their arms, weapons that glowed with heat signatures that meant they were full of energy. Ready to fire. Colonel Henry Graham's voice came through the speakers in the orbital command center. All ground units are engaging. We have the Vex surrounded. This is going to be close. Lisa understood what close meant. It meant people were going to die. It meant that despite all the planning, all the preparation, all the weapons they had built, humans were going to suffer losses. War was always like this. You could plan for it. You could prepare for it. But when it started, people died. The battle over Washington lasted 45 minutes. The American soldiers, equipped with advanced armor and weapons, moved in coordinated teams against the Vex warriors. For the first time in Vex military history, they were actually challenged. The humans used tactics the Vex had never seen. They used terrain. They used surprise. They used teamwork in ways that the Vex, who were more interested in individual warrior strength, had never developed. One by one, the Vex warriors fell. The orbital displays showed the same thing happening in 3 other locations where Vex troops had landed. Humans died. Many humans died. But for every human killed, 3 Vex warriors were destroyed. The Vex had never experienced casualty rates like this. They had never faced an enemy that was willing to stand and fight. No matter how bad the situation looked, Lisa watched the numbers climb on the tactical display. Vex casualties increased with every passing minute. She also watched the human casualty numbers, and they made her heart hurt. So many names, so many people just gone. But each death meant a Vex warrior was not going to kill more humans. The Vex ships are breaking orbit, Lisa's second officer reported. 3 of them are moving to new positions. 2 are still disabled. Prepare the railguns, Lisa ordered. I want everything ready. If those ships try to get back to full combat capability, we will not give them the chance. The orbital platform had its own weapons. Railguns that could fire projectiles at speeds faster than anything the Vex had probably encountered. They were not as dramatic as the kinetic rods, but they were fast, accurate, and devastating at close range. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity was winning. They were losing soldiers, yes, losing people that could never be replaced. But they were also destroying the Vex forces faster than the Vex could replace them. Lisa thought about all those people down there on Earth, fighting and dying to protect their homes. She thought about her own family, down there somewhere in the chaos. Then she pushed those thoughts away. As a military commander, she could not afford to think about individuals. She had to think about the mission. She had to think about what it took to protect the species. Prepare for Phase 2, Lisa said into her headset. And someone get me direct communication with Colonel Graham. We need to coordinate the next strike. Lieutenant Commander James Foster was covered in dust and blood when he got the new orders. His platoon had been fighting for 8 hours straight, moving through the desert near Phoenix, Arizona, pushing back against the Vex forces that had landed at what they were calling Landing Zone 1. His armor was dented, scorched from energy weapons. His ammunition was running low. His men were exhausted, some of them wounded, all of them scared. But they were still fighting. The new orders told him to push deeper into the Vex positions. Command wanted him to reach the central landing zone, the place where the Vex had established their main base of operations on the ground. It was crazy. It was impossible. It was exactly the kind of order that got soldiers killed. James gathered his squad and briefed them. He did not sugarcoat it. We are going to go straight at them, he said. We are going to run through their defensive positions and hit their command center. Most of us will probably die. Some of us might make it out the other side. Are you with me? His soldiers looked at him. These were men and women he had trained with for 5 years. They had been through training together, lived together, fought together. They knew each other better than they knew their own families. We are with you, sir, his sergeant said. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. James had expected nothing less. The desert was hot, so hot that it felt like you were running through an oven. The Vex armor was designed for cold environments, for the vacuum of space and the frozen moons of the systems they controlled. Earth's heat was working against them. Their armor systems were overheating. Their efficiency was dropping. That was a small advantage, but in war, small advantages kept you alive. James led his platoon forward through a dry riverbed. Above them, the sky was filled with smoke from explosions and fire. The Vex had started their bombardment of Earth cities, trying to destroy military installations and civilian population centers. Thousands were dying. James tried not to think about it. He had to focus on his mission. They hit the first Vex defensive position without warning. James's soldiers were equipped with advanced armor, powered exoskeletons that gave them strength and speed. They moved like wolves, coordinated and deadly. The Vex soldiers, surprised by the sudden assault, tried to respond, but they were scattered, not coordinated like the humans. The human soldiers used what they had learned in training. They moved in teams of 4. While one team provided cover fire, the other teams advanced. When those teams got close enough, they used melee weapons, swords made of hardened composite material that could cut through Vex armor. It was brutal, up-close, violent fighting, and the humans were good at it. 20 Vex soldiers died in the first 2 minutes. But then the Vex command center realized what was happening and sent reinforcements. They came from both sides, trying to cut off the human advance. James saw the trap being set and made a decision. Instead of retreating, he charged straight forward, straight at the main Vex position. If they were going to be surrounded, they might as well go down fighting, taking as many of the Vex with them as they could. His soldiers followed without hesitation. This was what they had trained for. This was why they were soldiers. The battle was intense and brutal. Humans and Vex faced each other across the desert floor, firing weapons, throwing grenades, fighting hand-to-hand when they got close enough. The Vex were stronger, individually more powerful than any human. But the humans were faster, more flexible, and they worked together in ways the Vex could not match. The Vex fought as individuals. The humans fought as one organism. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Dust and smoke filled the air. The sound of weapons fire was constant, deafening. Soldiers fell, both Vex and human. James fought his way through the chaos, his sword in one hand, a plasma gun in the other. His armor was designed to protect against Vex weapons, but nothing was perfect. He took hits that scorched his suit, left marks in the armor. If one of those hits had been a centimeter to the left, he would have died. But he did not think about that. He just kept fighting. His sergeant, David O'Connor, was fighting beside him. David was bigger than James, stronger, a former college football player who had turned his size and strength into military skill. Together, they punched through the Vex defensive line. Behind them, James could hear the rest of his platoon, 30 strong, pushing forward. They had lost 4 soldiers in the initial assault. 4 good people, gone forever. James would have to think about that later. Right now, he had to focus on the mission. They reached the command center, a structure made of some kind of metal that James did not recognize. It was sleek and smooth, looking nothing like human architecture. Vex soldiers were positioned around it, defending it with everything they had. James's platoon took positions around the structure. They had been trained for this, for close assault on hardened positions. They used their combined firepower to suppress the Vex defenders. Then, moving fast, they charged the main entrance. 3 soldiers died in that charge. One of them was Williams, a young woman from Texas who had enlisted 5 years ago to earn money for college. She had been smart, funny, always talking about what she was going to study when the war was over. Now she was not going to study anything. She was not going to do anything except lay there in the desert sand and be mourned by the people who loved her, but her death was not meaningless. Because of the space she created by drawing enemy fire, the rest of the platoon got through the entrance. Inside the command center, computers hummed. Displays showed information James could not understand. and Vex officers worked at stations designed for their height and physiology. They were surprised to see human soldiers inside their facility. They reached for weapons, but James's people were faster. The firefight was brief and terrible. When it was over, 5 Vex officers were dead, and James's platoon had control of the command center. James immediately made contact with Colonel Henry Graham. "We have the main landing zone command center," he reported. "Vex forces are in disarray. The coordination is falling apart." "Good work," Henry's voice came back. "Hold your position. We are sending reinforcements. The Vex are starting to pull back from multiple locations. You have hurt them bad." James looked at his people. They were exhausted, covered in blood and dust, many of them wounded. But they were alive. They had completed their mission. They had hurt the enemy. They had done what soldiers do outside the command center, across the desert. The sounds of battle continued. But the pace was changing. The Vex were no longer advancing. They were retreating. For the first time since the invasion began, it felt like humanity might actually survive this. James sat down on the floor, his back against the wall, and allowed himself to close his eyes for just a moment. When he opened them again, reinforcements were already arriving. Human soldiers in powered armor, moving through the desert toward their position. The tide of war had turned. Colonel Henry Graham had not slept in 60 hours. The command center was still alive with activity, filled with the sound of keyboards clicking, people talking into headsets, the beep of alarms when important information came in. Screens showed the situation across the entire planet. The Vex forces were shrinking, being pushed back, losing ground. But they were not surrendering. They were reorganizing, preparing for what looked like a final assault. "How many Vex ships are still operational?" Henry asked the tactical officer standing next to him. 8 confirmed operational, sir," the officer replied. 2 are heavily damaged but still moving. The others are functional. They are taking up positions for what our models predict will be a full planetary bombardment. They seem to have decided to sterilize the surface rather than continue the ground campaign. Henry understood what that meant. The Vex had realized they were losing. They could not defeat humanity's military forces through conventional combat. So they were going to do what they had probably done on other worlds, what they had probably done dozens of times before. They were going to use their orbital advantage to destroy everything from space. Cities would burn. Millions of people would die. But the military would be eliminated, and then the Vex could land unopposed, at least. That is what they believed would happen. Patricia Wells appeared beside Henry with her datapad. She looked as tired as he felt, but her eyes were sharp, focused. "I have an idea," she said, "but you are not going to like it." "Try me," Henry said. "Their command structure is centralized," Patricia explained. "All 9 ships are connected through a neural network, a kind of hive mind that lets them coordinate. Take out the command ship, and the network falls apart. Without the network, they cannot coordinate bombardment. They become 9 separate ships instead of one unified fleet." "What is the problem?" Henry asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "The command ship is the most heavily defended target," Patricia said. "Any direct assault on it would require something that could get close before the other ships could defend it. Something fast, something that is already in space." Henry closed his eyes. He knew exactly what Patricia was suggesting. "Lisa Norton," he said. "Yes," Patricia nodded. "She can take the orbital station and use it as a weapon. Get it close enough to the command ship, and we can disable the vessel with a focused strike. But she will not survive the maneuver. The station will not survive. But it will break the Vex command structure." Henry opened his eyes and looked at Patricia. "You are talking about asking her to commit suicide to save the planet." "I am talking about asking her to make the choice that every soldier has to be willing to make," Patricia said. The choice to sacrifice themselves so that others can live. We can ask her. But if she says no, we have to respect that decision. Henry picked up the phone that connected to the orbital command center. It rang once before Lisa answered. "Colonel, good to hear your voice." "Lisa, we have a problem," Henry said. He explained the situation, explained what Patricia believed needed to happen, explained what it would mean for Lisa if she chose to do it. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Lisa said, "Send me the targeting data." "I will do it. You understand what you are agreeing to?" Henry asked, even though he already knew the answer. "I understand," Lisa said. "I became a soldier because I believed in something bigger than myself. I became an astronaut because I wanted to see what was beyond our world. Now I get to do both at the same time. I get to look death in the face and make a choice that matters. Send me the data. Let me do this." Henry sent the data. Then he called down to the ground forces and told them to prepare for what was going to happen. He told them to hold their positions, to keep fighting, because everything was about to change. Lisa Norton sat in the command chair of the Sentinel-7 orbital platform, studying the targeting information. The command ship was 3,000 kilometers away, heavily protected by the other Vex vessels. To get close enough to cause real damage, she would have to fly the entire station right at it, push the engines way past their design specifications, and trust that she could get close enough before the Vex weapons tore the station apart. It was not a good plan. It was the only plan. "All personnel, this is Commander Norton," she said over the station's communication system. "I am ordering an immediate evacuation. All non-essential personnel are to board the emergency shuttles. You have 15 minutes. This is not a request. Move now." The evacuation took 10 minutes. 87 people left the station in 3 shuttle pods, heading back to Earth. When they were gone, Lisa was alone on the station. Just her and the computers in the silence of space. She initiated the sequence. The station's engines, designed for minor corrections and slow maneuvering, began to push. The structure groaned under the stress. Parts of the station that were not designed for high acceleration began to fail. But Lisa did not care about that. The station was no longer a research and defense platform. It was a weapon, and weapons could be broken when they were used. The Vex sensors detected the movement immediately. The command ship adjusted its position, and the other ships began to move to intercept. They started firing at the approaching station, kinetic weapons and energy beams filling the space between them. The first hits scorched the station's outer hull. Lisa felt the station shudder. She increased the acceleration. More hits came. A whole section of the station decompressed, losing its atmosphere to the vacuum of space. Warning lights filled the display. Lisa ignored them. She was committed now. There was no turning back. The command ship was getting closer. 2,000 kilometers. 1,000. 500. Lisa could see it now on the visual display. A massive wedge shape, bristling with weapons. It was beautiful in a terrible way. It was also about to die. At 200 kilometers, Lisa had a clear shot. She activated the nuclear warheads that were buried deep in the station's core. Warheads that the Joint Chiefs did not know existed. Warheads that Lisa had installed herself because she had always believed that humanity might need something more than conventional weapons. She set the timer and keyed the sequence. "This is for Earth," she said quietly. "This is for all the people fighting down there. This is for my family. This is for the human race." She pressed the button. The explosion was visible from Earth's surface. It was like a new star suddenly appearing in the sky. The command ship was at the center of a bloom of white fire, its hull rupturing, its crew dying, its network going silent. In the command center on Earth, every screen went black for a moment. Then, slowly, they came back to life. And when they did, the computer showed something that no one had expected. The Vex fleet had no coordination. The 9 ships were moving independently, their movements becoming erratic, their firing patterns becoming random. Without the central command, without the neural network that connected them, they were helpless. Henry looked at the displays and then at Patricia. "She did it," he said. "Yes," Patricia said quietly. "She did." On the screens, they could see the Vex ships beginning to fall apart. Some of them were firing at each other, unable to tell ally from enemy without the network to coordinate them. Others were trying to retreat, to escape from the human forces that were now moving in for the kill. The tide had turned. The war was not over yet, but humanity was going to survive. Humans were going to win, and the cost had been Major Lisa Norton, a woman who had looked death in the face and chosen to fight anyway. A woman who had saved the world by giving her life. The last Vex ship fell from the sky over the Atlantic Ocean exactly 94 hours after the invasion began. It had been crippled by human fighters, its engines dead, its weapons offline. As it descended through the atmosphere, it broke apart, spreading wreckage across thousands of kilometers of ocean. The ships that had come to conquer Earth, to steal its resources and destroy its people, were all gone now. The world exhaled. For the first time in 3 days, there was silence. Colonel Henry Graham stood in the command center of the Pentagon, looking at displays that now showed nothing but empty sky. The Vex were defeated. The invasion was over. Humanity had survived, but the cost had been terrible. The final numbers came in over the next few hours. 54,000 soldiers had died. Another 120,000 were wounded. Entire cities had been destroyed. In Washington, D.C., large sections of the capital were nothing but rubble. Los Angeles had been hit hard. London, Tokyo, Moscow, New Delhi, Cairo, all had suffered damage. Tens of millions of people were homeless. The global economy was in ruins. Hospitals were overflowing with the wounded. The dead were still being counted, but there was something else too. There was pride. There was the knowledge that humans, against impossible odds, had stood and fought and won. The Vex had come expecting easy victory. They had found something they had never encountered before. A species that would not break, that would not surrender, that would fight to the last person if that is what it took. James Foster stood in a field outside Phoenix, looking at the wreckage of the Vex command center. The building had been destroyed, torn apart by the human assault. Dead Vex soldiers lay scattered around it. American soldiers were taking inventory of the alien technology, trying to understand what they had captured. James was thinking about his people. He had lost 9 soldiers in that assault on the command center. 9 people who had families, who had dreams, who would never come home. He would have to write letters to their families. Letters that would try to explain why their loved ones had died. Letters that could never adequately capture the loss. But James was also thinking about the millions of people who were alive right now because his platoon had done what it did. His 9 soldiers had given their lives so that an entire planet could live. That was the equation of war. It was never fair, never equal. But sometimes he had to accept it because the alternative was worse. A message came through his headset. It was from command. All soldiers were being ordered back to bases for debriefing and medical evaluation. The ground war was over. Now came the work of healing, of rebuilding, of figuring out what would happen next. Above Earth, in the United Nations Assembly, an emergency session was being held. The nations of Earth, which had always been divided, were now united in a way they had never been before. They had fought together. They had bled together. Now, they had to decide what came next. A new military organization was being formed, Earth Defense Command. It would be controlled by the United Nations, answerable to all nations. Its purpose would be to protect Earth from further invasion and to explore space. To learn about the aliens who lived out there. To understand the threats and opportunities that the galaxy held. Colonel Henry Graham was appointed the first commander of Earth Defense Command. It was a position of enormous power and enormous responsibility. Henry accepted it because he knew what had to be done. Earth could not simply rebuild and hope nothing else came out of the darkness. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and now that the Vex knew humans could fight, other species would want to test them, would want to learn if this victory had been a fluke or if humans were truly as tough as they seemed. Patricia Wells was appointed Chief Scientist of Earth Defense Command. She spent long hours analyzing the Vex technology that had been captured, learning how their weapons worked, how their ships operated. She believed that within 10 years, Earth could build its own interstellar ships. Within 20, Earth could become a true spacefaring civilization. In Arlington Cemetery, a funeral service was held for the fallen. There were so many of them that the ceremony lasted all day. The president spoke. Henry Graham spoke. Families of the dead came to say goodbye to people they would never see again. There was grief, but there was also gratitude. These soldiers had saved the world. Lisa Norton's family attended her memorial service. Her parents stood in front of her headstone, a stone that bore her name and the dates of her life. 1982 to 2087. She had lived only 105 years in the future, but she had changed the course of history. The stone had an inscription that Lisa's mother had chosen. She touched the stars and saved the world. James Foster was given a promotion to captain. He was assigned to help train the next generation of military personnel, soldiers who would be equipped with even better armor, even better weapons, soldiers who would be ready if another invasion came. He threw himself into the work because it was the only way he could make sense of what had happened. By training others, he could ensure that the sacrifice of his fallen soldiers would not be wasted. In the months after the invasion, Earth changed. New military bases were built. Weapons development accelerated. Universities around the world started programs in xenobiology, the study of alien life. The idea of traveling to the stars, which had once seemed like a distant dream, suddenly became urgent reality. But most importantly, humanity changed how it saw itself. For most of history, humans had thought of themselves as weak, as fragile, as dependent on technology to survive. The invasion had shown them the truth. Humans were not weak. Humans were not fragile. Humans were fighters, adaptable, determined, capable of incredible feats when their lives and their world were at stake. The Vex had made a mistake when they came to Earth. They had assumed that superior technology meant automatic victory. They had not understood that humans were warriors by nature, that humans had evolved on one of the harshest planets in the known galaxy, that humans thrived in conditions that would kill almost any other species. Word of Earth's victory spread through the galaxy. Other species, ones that had been subjugated by the Vex Collective for centuries, began to reach out to humanity. They wanted to know how humans had done it. They wanted to learn human tactics. Some of them wanted to join forces with humans to push back against the Vex. The galaxy was changing. And at the center of that change was a species that no one had expected to matter: humans. The small, fragile creatures from the harsh planet at the edge of the galaxy had proven that they were anything but helpless. In the command center of Earth Defense Command, Colonel Henry Graham stood looking at the stars. The war with the Vex was over, but the story of humanity among the stars was just beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, more threats from species they had never met. But now, Earth was ready. Now, humans knew that they could stand against the darkness and win. Henry thought about all the soldiers who had died, all the people who had sacrificed everything so that humanity could survive. He thought about Lisa Norton. the astronaut who had looked death in the face and chose to fight. He thought about James Foster and his platoon, moving through the desert, attacking impossible odds. He thought about all the others, the names that would be remembered, and the names that would be forgotten but whose sacrifice would be woven into human history forever. The stars above were no longer frightening. They were no longer unknown. They were a frontier, waiting for humans to explore, to settle, to make their mark. And humanity, having proven itself in fire and blood, was ready to meet that frontier head-on. The invasion had failed. But something greater had succeeded. The human race had been tested and had not broken. The human race had stood and fought and won. And now the galaxy would never be the same.